Hey, welcome back everyone to the Progressive Brothers Podcast. This is episode 103. I'm here with my co-host, Renaissance Man.
Welcome back, everyone. Please like the video. Peace to everybody in the chat, and please subscribe to the channel.
Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter at brothers_podcast. Reparations. Clyburn was confronted recently by an unknown social medialite, or a socialite for that matter, about HR 40, which is the study for reparations. What's your take on this, Renaissance Man, in terms of some of the murmurings about HR 40 and reparations in regards to it passing, through the House and Senate?
And this clip, the clip that I saw, it's about a 2-minute clip. The author, the person who's asking the questions, he clearly demonstrates it. It may be hard for some people to hear when you listen to it, but he clearly demonstrates he doesn't know a lot about this bill because, he starts off asking in the clip essentially, hey, I'm interested, we want tangibles, we want HR 40 passed, and Clyburn points out to him that, I've been pushing that bill for 30 years. It's older than my grandson. To which his reply is, well, you need to tell Sheila Jackson Lee to push the bill. And he's like, yeah, she offered it. So I think the main takeaway from it, and he said in the end, he was saying, hey, I want to make headway, y'all want to make headlines. I want to make headway. And that's what I think a lot of this stuff has boiled down to with a lot of the ADOS movement. I see these guys jumping in the face of a lot of. This is the second time I believe they've gone and approached Clyburn, but it's always a lot of critique of Black Democrats, and they're not doing this and they're not doing that. But I never see them go and challenge Mitch McConnell or any of these Republicans who won't even vote for a bill an infrastructure bill or a stimulus bill, voted against that, and they somehow don't have anything to say to these people about not voting for reparations, even though it's clear that you're going to need their support to get it passed. And then on top of that, they attack the very people who have written the bill, who have sponsored the bill, who have brought it up and tried to push it through the House. It just shows a lot of people don't know the process, and it's very counterproductive because the only reason you're even having a discussion about reparations right now is because of Democrats.
Right. And the misnomer around reparations is that somehow, some way, it's only up to a couple of people, and then suddenly, and these people always have to be Black. Somehow, some way, it's some kind of Congressional Black Caucus person, or there's some other Black person who's a city council member. There's always this idea that an elected official is ultimately responsible for cutting the check. and I find that sort of perspective is toxic for reparations, because the whole idea behind HR 40 is the study of the process of how it would actually work. These people want the check now, and they don't care about the process. And that is that's part of the reason why you can't get any progress, because a lot of them want to go straight to the top. We saw this kind of with Ice Cube, right? Ice Cube came with his contract with Black America, and this idea was like, oh, well, is Biden going to talk to Ice Cube? Well, who's Ice Cube? And who's this guy in the clip talking to Clyburn, who thinks that he can just walk up to Clyburn and have this sort of really high-level conversation about something that requires a lot more, granularization in law in the process, without actually understanding how this all works. Like, everybody wants to, jump the line and cut corners and don't care about the process and don't even realize that they're muddying all of the waters to get this done.
Yeah. Like I said, ignorance of the process, and then also A lot of these people don't vote. It shows. I've heard just anecdotal evidence from certain people, and then just in general, when you have that type of lack of knowledge of the process, it tells me you don't participate in the process. Which the ironic thing I find about that is people will say, "Oh well, we vote, so we should get something for our vote." Well, not everyone votes. In fact, a lot of people don't. So why are they concerned about what they're getting for something that they themselves admit that they don't even participate in? It's really crazy to me. And on top of that, they, like I said, they don't even know basic sort of basic process, or not only just the bill, but other legislation they're pushing. Like, for example, there's one reparations bill, which is HR 40. There's actually another reparations bill that was, I believe, sponsored by James Clyburn, Raphael Warnock, and I believe it was a Democratic official as well, too, up in your area in Massachusetts, where it's actually trying to give reparations.
And Markey.
To Black veterans from World War II who were denied their GI benefits, or any of their descendants. So, essentially, if you can identify that, hey, you had GI benefits that were due to you that were denied for all sorts of reasons. Just historically, there's been instances of a lot. This is one example of a program where they basically had it as I believe, a federal program, but it was administered by the states. So a lot of trickery kind of went on in the administration, where you had instances like, I believe history has a story on where, the mailman literally intercepts, a Black GI's application for his GI benefits. People going to that extreme to make sure, or people just being outright denied. So a lot of that went on. So there's actually a bill there to address some of that. And we'll see where it goes. But to me, if you want to talk about how, Black folks need to be more involved in the Republican Party, and, that there's room over there and headway, this should be one of those middle grounds that Republicans and Democrats should agree on, because Republicans say that they care about the military, they care about veterans. So, this should be something that they can meet on. But I'm willing to bet that this bill, if it comes up for a vote, there will be very little, if any, Republican support. And it probably will not get passed just because of the makeup of the House and the Senate. But like I said, it's something, if you listen to these people who talk about, well, we need people on both sides, that should be an area of compromise. They should be able to leverage their side to go and support on. That's if they're involved in the process. But you have people who are so hung up on HR 40, they don't even understand the other things that these people have on the table that, truth be told, are going to be a lot easier to pass if I had to choose between the two and get done with the right support.
And if you had the numbers, right? I mean, in the clip, Clyburn refers to Cinema and Manchin. But if you have Gary Chambers running, and then you have Lieutenant Governor coming out of Wisconsin running for Senate of Wisconsin, and then you have Malcolm Kenyatta running out of Pennsylvania. Now you have 54 to 46? Is that what that, or 54 to 47?
Yep.
So now you have majority. But then if you have the woman coming out of North Carolina, now you have 55, 46 or something like that. So you need the numbers in order to get this. Sheila Beasley, sorry. You need the numbers in order to make this work. But that's a part of the process at the legislative level, and then the process of even how to dole out reparations is another process. These cut the check mafia people who think that they can just turn people upside down and shake them for pennies, for reparations. They don't even understand the process. They think that everything is just as simple as a waiver of the pen, cut the check, and put it in the mail and call it a day, or put it in my Cash App if they had their way, right? They want it in their Cash App. If you left it up to them, they would love to have like a a channel on YouTube for reparations and then have it doled out through like super chats or something like that, right? And so they don't. It's the struggle of actually getting some basic civic and government's literacy into the perspective, to have this sort of discourse to begin with. It's just so many people are involved in trying to strong arm their way through politics and don't even realize that that's not even how it works. Even the black farmers can't get their own reparations, as it stands right now. So it's not just one fight. It's a fight on many fronts, and it's a process, and you need people to be in position in order to make that work. But if you're not going to support the party and you're not going to support the candidates running to make this work, you're not going to ever get to that ultimate goal. So
yeah. No. Like I said, I think the main thing that Clyburn pointed out was, like he said, people don't organize, they don't come out to vote, and then as a result, we lose things like the Voting Rights Act, and then you have people running around saying cut the check. And your voting rights are currently under assault right now, which even if people decided to, hey, we're gonna actually do the right thing and follow the process, you're looking at a suppressed vote, or at least an attempt to suppress your vote, and that doesn't seem to bother these people.
And reparations doesn't always have to be federal, because it doesn't always have to be one kind of reparations, right? We saw in California under Gavin Newsom, when he gave the beach, he was able to repatriate that beach back to the original owners when it was taken to them during Jim Crow. And so there's other ways of going about this at the state level, at the city level, and at the federal level, and it's just about the amount of nuance that's going to be involved in trying to approach each and every avenue of reparations. Reparation isn't just one thing; it's many things that come over time. So that's my thoughts on Clyburn. I think Clyburn had an excellent response, in my opinion, and I think that should be the normal response to all the cut the check mafia who thinks that they can just extort and racketeer politicians to get a check that they don't even understand. They don't even know if they're even qualified for it. So
yeah, and I think one final thought that'll kind of play into the next topic is look at the makeup of the Supreme Court now. Any sort of reparations bill that gets passed is going to go the way of the Black Farmers Bill as well too, where it's going to get challenged in the courts. And as we'll talk about soon, the Supreme Court looks like it's set to overturn precedents. So, some of the things that may have actually, even the avenues that may have, and legal precedents that may have actually been there to support something like this, could very well be overturned if it made its way to the Supreme Court, which I'm sure it would, with how far right this court appears to be. So
interesting, because we walk into this discussion about abortion, right? And anti-abortion bills, Texas being the main progenitor behind a lot of this, and now you have probably about a dozen, if not 24 states that have proposed anti-abortion bills on the books. What's your take on what's happening with all of this, absent of the Supreme Court?
Oh yeah, no, it's not really surprised. I mean, once you had the leaked draft, I saw a notification yesterday that said, I believe it's the governor of Nebraska said like they would hold a special session if Roe v. Wade was overturned to ban abortion completely in the state of Nebraska. So you have a bunch of these red states who are really jumping on this full steam, really trying to get out ahead of this, anticipating that this will be overturned. I think like I said, it's not surprising. It's been a wedge issue for a long time. I think the interesting thing that will be the fallout from it. Roe v. Wade is something that's supported by over 70% of Americans. So this is not a popular position. So seeing Republicans go and double down on a lot of this stuff, I think there could definitely be a major backlash, both within the party and within with the midterms coming up, because like I said, this is a small, it's really shrinking. If you look at the evangelical movement, it's actually shrinking relative to, I believe its peak would probably be more in the 90s, even though it is becoming more vocal and more radicalized. But that's a small segment of American society. And, it really sort of, in my opinion, is going to be a bad look for a lot of these people. But I think the proof will be what happens at the polls behind all of this.
The polls are important because this generation, the millennials, and I would say some of the younger Gen Xers, this is not a big issue for them. That's not a way to drive these people to the ballot to support it. In reality, what it's actually going to do is going to alienate people from the party because they don't want to be told what to do, even though the party itself is anti-big government, right? They're all about small government. And their perspective is, don't tell me to put on the mask, but allow me to tell you about your reproductive rights. And that's the way they co-opt the language of this whole thing. Because this didn't just start yesterday or last week or last month. This has been 50 years in the making with the evangelicals, like you mentioned earlier, that their whole position is to run a secession movement against the federal government. If you look at a map of staying your ground, voting right restrictions, anti-abortion legislation, a map of that would show you like a neo-confederacy. And so they are basically leveraging the courts to succeed from the greater union of the United States and determining states' rights versus federal or the federal side of the rights perspective. And so they want to kind of break that apart. And the thing here is you have rights that are inalienable to you, rights, your right to free speech, your right to possess a firearm, right? Right to privacy, 4th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, then you can include the 19th Amendment and so on and so forth. These rights are within the Constitution. If you're an American, if you identify as a citizen of the United States, these rights cannot be taken from you. And what they're trying to do is create this wedge issue as a means to get to that next level of how do we break the federal government away from the state itself, or how do we break the state away from the federal government so that the federal government can't come here and tell us what to do with the people who are within our state, as we see it.
Yeah, I think also the thing that recently they had actually, I believe it was last week, Friday, late last week, they actually had a vote in the Senate, and I think it passed the House. They had a vote in the Senate as well too on the bill to basically federalize abortion, make it, instead of being based on legal precedents, actually putting a bill forth, which tends to be a little bit harder to strike down, in the courts, is when it's passed by the Congress. But obviously that failed. So I think it'll be people like, I think, a Susan Collins, a Lisa Murkowski. Some of those people might even be in some trouble with their own constituents because, I believe it was Susan Collins who explicitly, said that, she would support she wouldn't support a candidate that would overturn Roe. And, I believe it's Kavanaugh is one of the, Alito, I believe, wrote the opinion, but Kavanaugh is one of the votes, obviously, along with Barrett, who are supporting this, who would have normally, not supported something like this with the, obviously RBG and the previous justices there.
Yeah, and for a lot of your quote unquote black libertarians or black conservatives, they see this as a victory for them, and so they're standing with the power of the government to come in and usurp ADOS women, black women, whatever you want to call them. And they think that this is a good thing. They don't understand the intricate details behind this, because this isn't about abortion. Okay, it's not about reproductive rights. It's about who has the power to determine personal autonomy for all intents and purposes. Because it starts off as abortion, but then it goes into voting rights, and then it goes into what kind of books can be produced for school. Then it becomes about public schools and charter schools and segregating schools and rolling back interracial marriage and so on and so forth. It's a cascading effect is what it's meant to produce. And they're only looking at the surface of, how, this is going to straighten out sisters, right? And the idea is this is unrealistic to think that white people who are long-standing, guardians of rights or something like that, right? These sort of founding fathers, right? These people that have long had the ability to make these choices don't have the best interests of black men either. They don't really care if black women have an abortion. In fact, abortion was created, from an issue standpoint, to get rid of a lot of those children. So a lot of those people on that other side don't really care about black children anyways, because if that was the case, you wouldn't be willing to kill, Tamir Rice or Trayvon Martin, or they would be more advocating for, the best interests of black children. But you don't really hear that from those people on that side. I don't think they really understand the long-term effect of this, because now you're talking about HIPAA, breaking of HIPAA, breaking of the Fourth Amendment, breaking of data privacy and email, the ability to circumvent that, encryption, decrypting your email, decrypting your messages to see what's going on so that they can, leverage their state rights against you. There's a whole lot that comes out of all of this, and I find it interesting that the people who are, in the black community, who are the biggest advocates to stand behind this, are only standing behind it as a way to get back at sisters. So,
yeah, no. One person I was having a discussion with, they pointed out that if you take the idea of a lot of the rhetoric you hear from these people is that life begins at conception. One thing he pointed out is, he said, okay, so are we going to start counting pregnant women twice in the census and start looking at like malapportionment, or like if a woman slips and falls and dies, like, are you going to now be expending funds to try to figure out, if she's pregnant, how the child died as well? Because even if she's a month pregnant, because, under your legal definition now, that is a life that was taken. So like, people really, because it's such a cultural war issue, people really don't stop and think of any of the implications from the legal standpoint that you just threw out. And that's where a lot of times when I see these laws with conservatives, they end up with egg on their face. Being someone who's lived in conservative state before, one of the big laws that they pushed was on IDs for immigrants. And what ended up happening is Mercedes ended up building a plant in Alabama, and they ended up pulling over a Mercedes executive and throwing him in jail because he didn't have an ID. It's like, well, of course he doesn't have an Alabama ID. He's an expat. He's someone who's an executive who's from Germany, just over here temporarily. But same thing with that bill. It also ran off a lot of the day laborers. So you had a lot of people who did the work in the agricultural sector. They couldn't find people to work chicken houses, work in the agricultural fields, because all those people basically left and moved to places, that didn't have these harsh laws surrounding, immigration and identification. And it was a net loss for the economy. But, people don't think about any of this stuff. And it just, like I said, it's just culture war red meat. And it accidentally gets in the law, and then people are sort of left with egg on their face.
Yeah, and it's the only bullet in the chamber, so to speak. If they were playing Russian roulette, this would be, that round that goes off in the chamber. And so, because now if the whole idea was galvanizing your base around this issue and you get this issue passed, what else do you have to galvanize your base in 2024? CRT?
Pretty much.
I mean, what else? I mean, because you spent all of your currency, right? You spent all of your capital on this wedge issue of abortion. And the people in the black community who are so gun-ho about pushing this agenda are the same people who don't want to mentor. They don't want to date single mothers. They don't want anything to do with raising another man's child or something like that. If anything, they're aborting their responsibility, or what should be considered a responsibility in terms of a community, because how do you commune if you don't have any interest in the offspring that's already there? So why are you so concerned about offspring that has not been born yet? I just find these sort of talking points to be quite dubious at best.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And so the culture war is in full swing, and then it takes you all the way into Buffalo, where we see a white male who decides to go into a predominantly black area in Buffalo, where black people are shopping in the middle of the day, and decides that he's going to gun down as many as possible. Coincidentally, to our first topic, on the handle of the gun that he used, the AR-15, it said, "Here's your reparations," right? And it said "nigger" on it as well. Nigger, here's your reparations.
Oh wow! I did not realize that it said the first part about reparations.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So
yeah.
What's your take on the current event that just happened?
It's it was, to me, the first thing that stood out is when I first saw it. I was shocked at how quickly they identified it as being racially motivated, which makes me wonder if they just saw the gun and when he turned himself in at the scene, or if he was saying things, people were on the stream listening to him. Because I mean, the first notification I got was, hey, that there was a shooting and they suspect it's racially motivated, versus, what tends to happen is there'll be a shooting. People will kind of look like, wait, all of these people are black or Asian or of this descent. And then, it sort of gets there after some days of, okay, this was, like I said, immediate. Initial reaction is I'm not surprised, even though, it's definitely a sad situation. Definitely makes you think of the Charleston 9, as well as some other, more recent racially driven shootings. But I can't say I'm surprised in the sense of, when you look at this guy's manifesto, I've seen some people who have read it, who have pulled basically, he was basically floating the rhetoric of the Great Conspiracy, Great Replacement theory, which has become a mainstream talking point on Fox News with Tucker Carlson. So more and more people are getting radicalized. This rhetoric, which was once considered fringe, is now mainstream. And it's, whenever you have that happen, one of the things that people used to always be cautious about the rhetoric is that, when you say things, the mentally unstable, the crazies, or the people who've been radicalized, it only takes some mild rhetoric to set them off. And, we're way beyond mild right now with just the things that people are saying and doing, in the name of in the name of pandering to the base of their party. So that, coupled with algorithms, a lot of these social media sites really not policing their content too tightly, it creates a lot of echo chambers. And it takes something like this to I think really get people's attention. I think the thing that will be interesting in this to see, what really changes after this, with the Charleston 9, not saying that, tremendous change, but, you had people who had to acknowledge, I think the big thing to take away from the Charleston 9 was, hey, people couldn't downplay and act like, racially motivated crimes were non-existent, as well as, there's a big discussion around the Confederate flag, the removal of that from the state houses, as well as from other places throughout the South. Not saying that's enough, but that's one of the more visible things that I saw change, as well as I believe that was one of the catalysts for getting the discussion started on Confederate statues and names and monuments to people, and why these people were being honored. Because he definitely identified with some of that memorabilia. I guess my thought now is, does it bring it back to the idea of, it's been stated by the FBI that, white domestic terrorists is the biggest threat to national security of the United States? Does that bring that back front and center? And do we actually see some more aggressive policing on a lot of this rhetoric and what's being put out here?
Well, what's interesting to me is that about this incident is that he live streamed it on Twitch. Now, in 2019, there was a similar incident in New Zealand with the Christchurch shooter who went into a mosque and killed 51 people, and he live streamed that as well. And so you compound that with the Charleston 9, as well as the shooting in Texas. I think it was in El Paso during the Trump administration, where this person decided he was going to go into one of these Walmarts and shoot all of these Latinos, because there was just too many Latinos and nobody was doing anything about the border. You see the same sort of similar conditions of method, right? And so this idea that, one, he wants maximum carnage, and two, he wants to go out like a martyr. And in previous incidents, some guys would rather get shot by the police and go out, with their guns blazing. And then on the other half, now the martyr piece is about live streaming and showing everybody how much carnage they can do. Taken also into consideration in the non-shooting incident is the Virginia protest, right? What's the city in Virginia? Charlottesville.
Yep.
Where you had this guy who drove across state lines from Indiana, if I remember correctly, all the way down to Charlottesville to run his vehicles into a BLM protest. Okay. You have this person in Buffalo who drove 200 miles to a predominantly black area to carry out terrorism. And then you have Dylan Roof, who also drove a considerable amount of miles to this church to carry out terrorism. You see this sort of similar patterns of behavior and thought processes happening, where these people always target soft targets. Now let's compound that also with HBCU terror threats. We've seen that just in the last 90 days, last 6 months, of a number of HBCUs having bomb threats sent to them through these anonymous sources, and then they actually caught these people as well. Amazing forensics work allowed them to be captured. This is opening up, in my opinion, this is opening up a conversation about a civil war taking place. When you start talking about anti-abortion bills, stand your ground, voter restrictions, and the use of force through terrorism, and the taking over of state capitals such as Michigan and some of these other places around the country, Stonehill and well, I shouldn't say Stonehill, but some of these other southern states, just randomly taking over the capital. And then you had these, yo-yo truck drivers driving around DC not too long ago about mass restrictions when there was no mass restrictions in place. So the culture war has taken us into a lot more violence now than what we've ever seen. Let's say even during the Obama administration, I don't remember this many incidents happening at the level that we're seeing it now.
Yeah. Like I said, I think the Obama administration obviously was the beginning of really the undoing of the right, in the sense of really this is where since 2010 onward, really since I was in college and really came into started really following the political world, ever since I've been there, the rhetoric has only gotten more extreme and more ratcheted up. I remember I was talking to a friend who was talking about Obamacare, and he had a notification come up on his Facebook timeline where he had made a comment about Obamacare, and it was like sort of the 10-year anniversary of it. I can't remember what the comment was, but I think it was talking about, I guess, how much opposition people had to the bill or something along those lines. And I remember telling him, if you would have told me then that, this would have been the more tame, sort of moderate type of discourse and dissension you saw around Obamacare and just the political scene in general, I would have thought you're nuts. But, fast forward 10 years and you have people storming the Capitol. You have members of Congress who are involved, you have the House Minority Leader who's being subpoenaed. It really shows how radicalized a lot of things have become. And I think, like I said, the shootings are no different in the sense of, really, obviously you've had racially charged events, but, since throughout American history, but you definitely have seen a spike in the Trump era, and the post-Trump era as the rhetoric has become more ratcheted up. And sadly, I don't think this is the end. Unfortunately, I think it'll get worse before it gets better because, like I said, you have things like the Great Replacement Theory, which is now pretty much floated on Fox News every night by Tucker Carlson, and a lot of this stuff is becoming normalized, as well as, like I said, a lot of algorithms, things along those lines are making these people, putting these people in echo chambers and emboldening, some feelings that have always been there, but they're giving legitimacy to them by some of the sources that are coming behind and validating this stuff. And you really have no sort of alternative source that's seen as legitimate in their eyes that's calling any of this stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also take into consideration, like you said, January 6th, and the taking over these capitals, and the vigilantism of Kyle Rittenhouse. Somebody who drove across state lines or made his way into a quote unquote a BLM protest. Right? There's all of these sort of motives that somehow they must be they must take on the responsibility of engaging all of these lefties and all these black people and all these communists and all these socialists and Marxists, and all of these terms are actually euphemisms for niggas, and they can't wait to get their hands on some form of high-powered weapon like Kyle Rittenhouse, like Dylann Roof, like this person in Buffalo who decides that, I'm going to basically start mowing down as many people as possible. And it's like, okay. So on one hand, you think that there's too many of these lefties and black people are coming around. And on the other hand, you don't have any problem with Ukrainians coming here, right? Ukrainians, by way of this culture war, also denied Africans the ability to have exit, the country during the crisis, right? This idea that, they should be left behind and they should die, inside Ukraine while, all the other white skinned people should have the ability to leave and everything. And so all of this comes into perspective for me that there's a lot of ramping up of this sort of far-right rhetoric. Steve Bannon under the Trump administration traveled to Ukraine, if I remember correctly, and traveled to Western Europe to organize these people. And so now you're starting to see the culmination of all of the workings from the previous administration starting to come out now in full force.
Yeah. Like I said, it's gathering a lot of steam on the right, and doesn't seem to be cooling off anytime soon.
Absolutely. Still more to come. We haven't really seen the last of this, in my opinion. I think that definitely you're going to see a lot more events like this transpire between now, the midterms, and 2024, if the trajectory serves correct.
Yeah, that'll be the real test ground, is whether this how this plays out in the political at the polls will be the sort of the real test case on where things go, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Like, share, subscribe. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at brothers_podcast.